Hello, dear listeners. I'm so excited to each week be bringing you thoughts, breakdowns, and comparisons for novels and their film or TV adaptations. I'm Tracey, I'll be your host, and this is a Novel Take podcast.
I understand this topic is difficult for some members of the community due to the controversial stance the author has taken on trans issues, and I want to state that I do not agree with the author and her views. This podcast is a safe space for everyone to come together and share their love of Harry Potter without judgment. The only judgment being served is upon the movie adaptations.
Hello and welcome to your Novel Take podcast. I'm your host, Tracey, and thank you for joining me this week. I can't believe we're here at episode 5 already. And this is the last episode covering Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It's just gone too quickly. I hope you've all had a great week and welcome to November. 2 months left of the year, and may these 2 months be the most fruitful, and may you manifest only good things for yourself and your loved ones. I'm not going to waffle on too much today. It's currently late hours of Thursday evening as I record this, and I still need to edit after I record. So whoever manifested me not going on about my week this episode, thank you and you're welcome. Recapping last week, Harry had his first and second Quidditch matches against Slytherin and Hufflepuff, respectively, and managed to catch the Golden Snitch in each, winning the matches for Gryffindor. In the first match, his broom went loopy, causing him to nearly fall off, but Hermione saved the day with her signature blue flames. Harry discovered the Mirror of Erised and for the first time in his entire life saw his parents and other family members. Ron saw himself in the mirror as head boy and Quidditch captain and holding the Quidditch cup. Dumbledore told Harry about the mirror and that it's being moved, but if he comes across it again, he'll now know what to do. So mysterious, Dumbledore. Harry, Ron, and Hermione search the library in between classes for Nicholas Flamel, but it's a chance interaction with Neville where Harry sees Flamel on the back of Dumbledore's chocolate frog card that causes Hermione to recall seeing something in a book, and they find out Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone, thus surmising that's what Fluffy is guarding and what is hidden in the castle. It's time for a quick break. Welcome back. We are starting today with chapter 14, which is Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback. So after Harry saw Snape and Quirrell in the Forbidden Forest, Quirrell over the next few weeks gets thinner and paler, but as far as the trio know, he hasn't told Snape anything yet. Whenever they pass the third floor corridor, they listen at the door to see if Fluffy is still there, still growling, and Snape has his usual bad temper, which they take to believe the stone is safe. Whenever Harry passes Quirrell, he gives him an encouraging smile, and Ron starts to tell people off for laughing at Quirrell's stutter. Hermione has drawn up revision timetables and color-coded all her notes because it's coming up to exams, but they're 10 weeks away, and the teachers give them more homework than ever, and Easter holidays just aren't as much fun as the Christmas ones were. Harry and Ron spend most of their free time in the library, with Hermione going through all their extra work. Ron gives up, saying he'll never remember anything of this, and looks longingly out the window. Quote, "The sky was a clear forget-me-not blue, and there was a feeling in the air of summer coming." Quick pause to say that I love this feeling. As much as I love autumn, when winter turns to spring and the spring days just start to get a little bit warmer, especially when you're in school, it's the summer holidays coming up. And there were a few years where I really hated school and I just looked forward to summer holidays so much. It was a time for watching cricket, watching the Oz Open tennis, lounging in the pool, sunbathing with sunscreen on, barbecues, dinner outside, reading outside. There's just nothing like it. Oh, so, ah. Back in the library, Harry is looking up Dittany and doesn't pay attention until Ron says, quote, Hagrid, what are you doing in the library? Hagrid's hiding something behind his back and he looks very out of place. He says he's just looking and asks what they were up to. Quote, you're not still looking for Nicholas Flamel, are you? Ron says no, they found him ages ago, and starts to say they know Fluffy is guarding the Philosopher's Stone, but Hagrid shushes him and says not to shout about it. Harry starts to ask what else is guarding the stone apart from Fluffy, and Hagrid shushes him as well and says, quote, listen, come and see me later. I'm not promising I'll tell you anything, mind, but don't go rabbiting about it in here. Students aren't supposed to know. Hagrid leaves the library, and Hermione wonders what he had behind his back, and Harry wonders if it had anything to do with the stone. Ron goes off to see what section of the library Hagrid was in and comes back shortly after with a pile of books. He's got Dragon Species of Great Britain and Ireland, From Egg to Inferno, and A Dragon Keeper's Guide. Harry tells them, quote, Hagrid's always wanted a dragon. He told me so the first time I ever met him. Ron says, quote, dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks Convention of 1709. Everyone knows that. It's hard to stop muggles noticing us if we're keeping dragons in the back garden. Anyway, you can't tame dragons. It's dangerous. You should see the burns Charlie's got off wild ones in Romania. Harry asks if there are wild dragons in Britain, and Ron says there's the common Welsh green and Hebridean blacks. Hermione wonders what Hagrid is up to. That night, they knock on Hagrid's door and notice all the curtains are drawn. Inside, it's stifling hot. There's a fire in the grate. Hagrid makes them all tea and offers stoat sandwiches, which they refuse. Harry jumps in and asks if Hagrid can tell them what was guarding the stone aside from Fluffy. Hagrid says he can't because he doesn't know and he wouldn't tell them if he did. Hermione flatters Hagrid, saying, quote, you might not want to tell us, but you do know. You know everything that goes on around here. We only wondered who had done the guarding. We wondered who Dumbledore had trusted enough to help him, apart from you. Hagrid relents and tells them it was Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, Professor Quirrell, and Dumbledore himself. Oh, yeah, and Professor Snape as well. He says Snape is protecting the stone so he wouldn't steal it. They all look at each other thinking the same thing. Quote, if Snape had been in on protecting the stone, it must have been easy to find out how the other teachers had guarded it. He probably knew everything, except, it seemed, Quirrell's spell and how to get past Fluffy. Harry asks if they can open a window, but Hagrid glances at the fire and says no. Underneath the kettle is a huge black egg. Ron asks where he got it, saying it must have cost a fortune, and Hagrid says he won it last night playing cards with a stranger who seemed glad to be rid of it. Hermione asks what is he going to do with it once it hatches, and Hagrid tells her he's been reading up on dragons in a book he took out of the library, Dragon Breeding for Pleasure and Profit. There's a section on what to feed them, brandy and chicken blood, that's Brandy Watch times 2 now, and how to recognize the different eggs. He's got a Norwegian Ridgeback. They're rare, and Hermione says, quote, Hagrid, you live in a wooden house. But Hagrid's not listening. He's just humming merrily. One breakfast, Hedwig brought Harry a note from Hagrid saying, it's hatching. And Ron wants to skip herbology, but Hermione makes him stay, saying, we've got lessons. We'll get in trouble. Harry whispers at her to be quiet as Malfoy is close by and has stopped to listen, and Harry thinks he overheard. At the end of class, they all drop their trowels as soon as the bell sounds and they hurry to Hagrid's hut. Inside, the egg is on the table and it's much like in the movie. When it hatches, Hermione asks how fast do they grow, and before Hagrid can answer, his face goes white. Someone was looking in the window. Harry hurries outside, and there's no mistaking Malfoy, even at a distance. He's seen the dragon. In the movie, after uncovering Nicholas Flamel and what the Philosopher's Stone is, the trio head to Hagrid's hut at night. He tries to send them away, but they tell him they know about the Philosopher's Stone, and he ushers them in. If you look carefully, you'll notice Hagrid stands in front of the fire to block what's in there. The talk they have is much like the book, and the egg starts to hatch here and not over the course of a week or so. Ron is the one who tells them what type of dragon it is, and when the dragon hatches in the book, it is described as, quote, like a crumpled black umbrella. Its spiny wings were huge compared to its skinny jet body, and it had a long snout with wide nostrils, stubs of horns, and bulging orange eyes. In the movie, the dragon is clearly not jet black and it doesn't resemble a crumpled umbrella. They also don't discuss who else helped protect the stone. In the book, after Malfoy saw them with the dragon, for the next week he has a smile about his face, and they spend as much time as they can in Hagrid's hut trying to reason with him. Harry is urging Hagrid to set him free, but Hagrid says he's too little and tells them he's calling the dragon Norbert. In a week, Norbert has grown 3 times in length and smoke keeps furling out of its nostrils. There are empty brandy bottles and chicken feathers everywhere, and Harry says, quote, give it a fortnight and Norbert's going to be as long as your house. Malfoy could go to Dumbledore at any moment. Hagrid says he knows he can't keep him, but he can't just leave him. Harry suggests Ron's brother Charlie could take him, and Hagrid agrees, so they write Charlie a letter. A week later, on Wednesday night, Ron had been down at Hagrid's and Norbert had bitten him on the arm, but he has a response from Charlie that says, quote, Dear Ron, how are you? Thanks for the letter. I'd be glad to take the Norwegian Ridgeback, but it won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be to send him over with some friends of mine who are coming to visit me next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be seen carrying an illegal dragon. Could you get the Ridgeback up the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Send me an answer as soon as possible. Love, Charlie. Harry says it shouldn't be too difficult with the invisibility cloak. It's big enough to cover 2 of them and Norbert. Next morning, Ron's hand has swollen twice its size. He didn't want to go to Madame Pomfrey in case she recognized a dragon bite, but when it turned green by that afternoon, they realized Norbert's fangs are poisonous and he had no choice. At the end of the day, Harry and Hermione rush to the hospital wing where Ron tells them Malfoy had been in to laugh at him and had taken a book that had Charlie's letter in it. Harry tells Hermione it's too late to change the plan. An owl won't make it to Charlie in time, but they have the invisibility cloak, which Malfoy doesn't know about. So on Saturday night, they head down to Hagrid's. They have to wait in the entrance hall for Peeves to leave. He was busy playing tennis against a wall. At Hagrid's, Fang is sitting outside with a bandage on his tail, and Hagrid has Norbert packed and ready in a large crate with lots of rats and some brandy for the journey, and, quote, I've packed his teddy bear in case he gets lonely. From inside the crate came ripping noises that sounded to Harry as though Teddy was having his head torn off. Hagrid sobs goodbye to Norbert as Harry and Hermione cover themselves and Norbert with the invisibility cloak. They somehow get the crate up to the castle, up the staircases, and along dark corridors. Even with Harry's shortcuts, it's not easy, but they are almost there when there's movement ahead and they shrink into the shadows. It's Professor McGonagall, and she has Malfoy by the ear and shouts, Detention! And 20 points from Slytherin! Malfoy tried to tell her that Harry's coming and he has a dragon, but McGonagall says, quote, What utter rubbish! How dare you tell such lies? Come on, I shall see Professor Snape about you, Malfoy. After that, Harry and Hermione go up the steep spiral staircase, and once they get outside, they take off the invisibility cloak. Hermione is happy Malfoy has detention and does a little dance. 10 minutes later, Charlie's friends arrive. They've fashioned up a harness between their brooms and they help buckle Norbert into it. Harry and Hermione shake hands with them, and at last, Norbert is gone. They go back down the spiral staircase and are so happy that Norbert is gone. Malfoy has detention. What could spoil their happiness? Quote, the answer to that was waiting at the foot of the stairs. As they stepped into the corridor, Filch's face loomed suddenly out of the darkness. Well, 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 he whispered. We are in trouble. They'd left the invisibility cloak on top of the tower. In the movie, they are walking back to the castle after being at Hagrid's, and Harry tells them Hagrid has always wanted a dragon. He told Harry the first time they met. They are caught by McGonagall, not Filch, because Malfoy has told on them. This ends this part of the movie at around 1 hour, 41 minutes, 47 seconds. Chapter 15 is the Forbidden Forest and starts with Filch taking him down to Professor McGonagall's study. I can see why they change things up. It's for time, and it does make sense. They are sitting and waiting, and Hermione's trembling, and Harry is trying to think up a way out, but he realizes it's useless. He's kicking himself for forgetting the invisibility cloak. He doesn't know how things could possibly get any worse and thinks they may as well pack their bags. He's wrong though. Things do get worse. Professor McGonagall comes in, followed by Neville, who bursts out, quote, Harry, I was trying to find you to warn you. I heard Malfoy saying he was going to catch you. He said you had a drag. He stops when Harry shakes his head, but Professor McGonagall has seen. She's furious and asks them to explain, and it's the first time Hermione doesn't have an answer to a teacher's question. Professor McGonagall says, quote, I think I've got a good idea of what's been going on. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock and bull story about a dragon, trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I've already caught him. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom here heard the story and believed it too. Harry tries to catch Neville's eye to tell him without words it wasn't true, but Neville just looks stunned and hurt. Professor McGonagall continues to berate them. Quote, I'm disgusted. 4 students out of bed in one night. I've never heard of such a thing before. You, Miss Granger, I thought you had more sense. As for you, Mr. Potter, I thought Gryffindor meant more to you than this. All 3 of you will receive detentions. Yes, you too, Mr. Longbottom. Nothing gives you the right to walk around the school at night, especially these days. It's very dangerous, and 50 points will be taken from Gryffindor each. They try and plead with her, but she just says, Don't tell me what to do, and she's never been more ashamed of Gryffindor students. Now, I just want to say that just because a teacher hasn't heard of 4 students being out of bed in one night before doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I'm sure there are numerous students out of bed wandering the halls in the dead of night. We just need to look forward to the marauders and the antics they'll get up to. I think she's being very teacher like in thinking that those students don't get up to mischief. In the movie, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are standing in front of Professor McGonagall, and they are just so overlit. It looks like they are almost cardboard cutouts. Malfoy is in the room as well, and Professor McGonagall gives them all detention and takes 50 points each. In the book, they get up the next morning and the Gryffindors pass the giant hourglasses that record the house points, and they think there's been a mistake. How can it be so much lower than yesterday? Then the story starts to spread because it's Hogwarts, and it happens that Harry Potter, hero of their 2 Quidditch matches, had lost them all the points. Harry and a couple of other stupid first years. So Harry goes from being the most popular to the most hated. Even the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turn on him. They didn't want Slytherin to win the House Cup. The Slytherins themselves are happy with Harry and cheer him when he passes, saying, quote, Thanks, Potter, we owe you one. Ron stands by Harry, saying Fred and George lose points all the time and people still like them. Harry responds, saying, Sure, but not 150 points all at once. He swears not to meddle in things that aren't his business from now on. He's ashamed of himself and he goes to Wood and offers to resign from the Quidditch team, but Wood won't let him and says, quote, "How are we going to get any points back if we can't win at Quidditch?" But he's not even enjoying Quidditch. The rest of the team won't talk to him and refer to him only as the Seeker. Hermione and Neville are having a hard time as well. Not as bad as Harry, who is more well known, but nobody talks to them. And Hermione even stops drawing attention to herself in class. She stops putting her hand up and just works in silence. Harry is happy the exams aren't too far away because all the revision he's doing keeps his mind off things. A week before the first exam, Harry's quote, new resolution not to interfere with anything that didn't concern him was put to an unexpected test. He's walking back from the library and hears someone whimpering from a classroom. It's Quirrell who says, quote, no, no, not again, please. All right, all right. It sounds like someone is threatening him, and when Quirrell comes out of the classroom, straightening his turban, he is pale and looks like he's about to cry. Harry waits until he's gone and looks into the classroom. It's empty, but there's an open door on the other side. Harry is halfway across before remembering he is not going to meddle, but he thinks it was Snape in the classroom with Quirrell. Harry finds Ron and Hermione in the library and tells them what he heard. Ron is sure Snape's figured out how to get past Quirrell and Fluffy and asks Harry what do they do. There's a spark in his eyes. Hermione answers, quote, go to Dumbledore. That's what we should have done ages ago. If we try anything ourselves, we'll be thrown out for sure. Harry objects, saying they don't have proof, but concedes they can't do anything, much to Ron's disappointment. The next morning, Harry, Hermione, and Neville get notes delivered at breakfast. Quote, your detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall. Prof. M. McGonagall. Harry had forgotten about the detentions. At 11 o'clock, they farewell Ron in the common room and, with Neville, head to the entrance hall. Filch and Malfoy are already there. Like in the movie, Filch goes on about the old punishments. They follow Filch outside and meet Hagrid outside his hut. Like in the movie, they'll be going into the forest. Malfoy stops in his tracks, saying, we can't go in there. Hagrid tells him he will, or he can go back to the castle with Filch and pack his bags. Much like the movie, they're going into the forest and they're looking for an injured unicorn. In the movie, Filch takes them to Hagrid's hut, where Hagrid is upset over Norbert being sent away to Romania by Dumbledore. This next bit is a little different in the book. Malfoy wants Fang, and Hagrid teams him up with Neville, and Harry and Hermione go with Hagrid. He says if they find anything to shoot up green sparks, and if they get in trouble to shoot up red sparks. They split up and follow the trail of silver unicorn blood. Harry asks if it could be a werewolf, but Hagrid says they aren't fast enough to catch a unicorn. Quote, it's not easy to catch a unicorn. They're powerful magic creatures. I never knew one to be hurt before. Suddenly, Hagrid tells them to get behind a tree and fits an arrow into his crossbow. The three of them listen. Quote, something was slithering over dead leaves nearby. It sounded like a cloak trailing on the ground. Hagrid was squinting up the dark path, but after a few seconds, the sound faded away. They keep walking, and a centaur with red hair and a beard arrives. Hagrid knows the centaur, named Ronan, and asks him if he's seen anything in the forest that shouldn't be here. Ronan gets all mysterious and says, quote, Mars is bright tonight. Hagrid keeps asking, but Ronan keeps deflecting and eventually says, quote, the forest hides many secrets. Another centaur arrives, this one named Bane. Hagrid asks if he's seen anything, and Bane looks to the sky and says, quote, Mars is bright tonight. Frustrated, Hagrid leaves them, leading Harry and Hermione away. Hermione grabs his arm and points towards red sparks. Neville tells them to stay put and goes to find Malfoy and Neville. At last, Hagrid returns in a rage with Neville and Malfoy and Fang. Malfoy had snuck up on Neville as a joke, and Neville had panicked and sent up the red sparks. Hagrid swaps Harry and Neville, and now Harry goes off with Malfoy and Fang. Quote, Harry had never seen anything so beautiful and sad. Its long, slender legs stuck out at odd angles where it had fallen, and its mane spread pearly white on dark leaves. In the movie, Ron goes with Hermione and Hagrid, and Harry goes straight away with Malfoy and Fang. No swapping, no Neville. The book is much the same as the movie, and the centaur that saves him has white blonde hair and a palomino body. His name is Firenze and tells Harry the forest is not safe, especially for him, and tells him to get on his back. Bane and Ronan arrive, and Bane thunders his disapproval at Firenze for carrying a human like a common mule. Firenze bellows back with, quote, "Do you not see that unicorn? Do you not understand why it was killed? Or have the planets not let you in on that secret? I set myself against what is lurking in this forest, Bane. Yes, with humans alongside me if I must." This is a dynamic of the centaurs that we don't get to see in the movies. I think this movie is really the only one we see them in until they are what the trio used to capture Umbridge in Order of the Phoenix. Firenze takes Harry away, and Harry asks what the thing was under the cloak, and Firenze asks if Harry knows what unicorn blood is used for. Harry says no, they've only used the horn and the tail hair. In the movie, we only meet Firenze, and he doesn't offer to carry Harry on his back as they chat. Hagrid and the others find them. The book is also like the movie here, with Firenze explaining about killing a unicorn to Harry and what is hidden in the castle and who could possibly want or need such things. Firenze drops Harry back with Hagrid and says, quote, "Good luck, Harry Potter. The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs. I hope this is one of those times." Ron had fallen asleep waiting for them, so Harry wakes him up and then tells Ron and Hermione what happened. Harry paces in front of the fire saying, quote, "Snape wants the stone for Voldemort. Voldemort's waiting in the forest. Firenze saved me, but he shouldn't have done. Bane was furious. He was talking about interfering with what the planets say is going to happen. They must show that Voldemort's coming back. Bane thinks Firenze should have let Voldemort kill me. I suppose that's written in the stars as well." Ron begs him to stop saying the name. Hermione looks frightened but says, quote, "Everyone says Dumbledore's the only one you know who was ever afraid of. With Dumbledore around, you know who won't touch you." When they go back to bed, as the sky starts to get light, Harry pulls back his sheets and found his invisibility cloak underneath. There's a note that says, quote, "Just in case." In the movie, they are back in the common room, and a great detail is Harry pacing in front of the fire. This section of the movie ends around 1 hour, 50 minutes, 3 seconds. Our penultimate chapter is chapter 16, Through the Trapdoor. They get through all their exams with Harry expecting Voldemort to burst through the door at any moment, but the days go by and Fluffy is still behind the locked door. They've all got new quills for the exams, bewitched with an anti-cheating spell, and they have practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick asks them to make a pineapple tap dance across his desk. Professor McGonagall asks them to turn a mouse into a snuff box, and Snape makes them all nervous as they try to remember how to brew a forgetfulness potion. Harry's doing his best, but he has stabbing pains in his forehead, which haven't gone away since he was in the forest. Neville thinks Harry's got exam nerves, but Harry's old nightmare is back, and it's worse thanks to the hooded figure dripping in blood in it. Ron and Hermione don't seem as worried about the stone as Harry. Voldemort scares them, but they are too busy revising to worry about Snape. Their last exam is History of Magic, and even Harry cheers when Professor Binns tells them to put their quills down. And I forgot how much I love reading about the end of year exams and what happens. Harry, Ron, and Hermione head down to the lake and sit under a tree and watch the Weasley twins and Lee Jordan, quote, tickling the tentacles of a giant squid which was basking in the warm shallows. Ron is happy there's no more revision and tells Harry he could look more cheerful, but Harry's scar is hurting and it feels like danger is coming. Harry also has a feeling he's forgotten something and suddenly jumps to his feet, saying they need to go and see Hagrid. He asks Hagrid about the stranger who gave him the egg, and Hagrid says he didn't get a good look. He was wearing a cloak. Then Harry asks if Hagrid mentioned Hogwarts, and Hagrid said, yeah, it might have come up. The stranger was asking about all the creatures, and Hagrid told him about Fluffy. And once you know how to handle Fluffy, the rest is easy. For Fluffy, you just play a little bit of music and he goes to sleep. Hagrid looks horrified and says, I shouldn't have said that. In the movie, they are walking through the castle grounds after an exam, and Harry's scar hurts. A difference from the book, they are heading towards Hagrid's hut and hear Hagrid playing music, and Harry figures out about the dragon egg and Fluffy. Hagrid tells them here about Fluffy, and they rush to Professor McGonagall to see Professor Dumbledore. And I love the details here in this scene. There's a ghost doing homework at one of the desks. In the book, the trio leave Hagrid and race up the entrance hall where Harry says they need to go to Dumbledore. He's certain it was either Snape or Voldemort under the cloak. They realize they have no idea where Dumbledore's office is and are looking around when Professor McGonagall asks them what they are doing inside. Hermione says they need to go see Dumbledore, but they are told he's gone to London. They then say they know about the Philosopher's Stone and someone is going to try and steal it. But Professor McGonagall says Dumbledore will be back tomorrow and it's too well protected to be stolen, and they should go outside and enjoy the sunshine. Once they are out of earshot, Harry says Snape will go through the trapdoor tonight and they better keep an eye on him. Snape turns up behind them and says, people will think you're up to something, line from the movie, but they decide Hermione will linger around the staff room and Harry and Ron are going to stay outside the third floor corridor. And no sooner had they made it to the door where Fluffy was when Professor McGonagall catches them and loses her temper and says, quote, enough of this nonsense. If I hear you've come anywhere near here again, I'll take 50 points from Gryffindor. So they go back to the common room, and Harry says, well, at least Hermione still is covering Snape. But then she comes into the common room and says, quote, Snape came out and asked me what I was doing. So I said I was waiting for Flitwick. And Snape went to get him, and I've only just got away. Harry decides he's got to go get the stone himself. Ron says he's mad, and Hermione says he'll get expelled. And Harry shouts, quote, don't you understand? If Snape gets hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore. Can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor win the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a little bit later than I would have done because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two say is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember? Harry says he'll use the invisibility cloak, and Ron and Hermione say they'll go with him. In the movie, there is no keeping track of Snape, and they don't head to guard the door where Fluffy is. In the book, after dinner, they wait in the common room for everyone to leave, and once everyone's gone to bed, Harry goes upstairs to get the cloak, and he sees the flute Hagrid gave him for Christmas. He can use it on Fluffy. Back in the common room, they're about to get under the cloak when Neville tries to stop them, much like the movie. Under the cloak, they come upon Peeves on the staircase to the third floor. He's loosening the carpet so people will trip. He knows someone is there even though he can't see them, and Harry has an idea. He says, quote, Peeves, the bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible. Peeves almost falls out of the air and apologizes and goes away. In the movie, Hermione uses the body bind curse on Neville. He falls on his back, not his face. And I love his teddy bear jammies. They are so cute. And they all say sorry to Neville as they walk past him. In the book, they get to the third floor corridor and the door is already open. It's much like the movie, except there's also a harp, but it's not playing. Fluffy is wide awake, so Harry plays a flute and the dog falls asleep. Ron opens the trapdoor and Harry gives the flute to Hermione and goes through first. This is much like the movie with them landing on the devil's snare. Instead of them relaxing and falling through, though, Hermione gets away to the wall, but Harry and Ron are tangled in the tendrils. The following conversation I wished was in. Oh my god, I wish this was in the movie. I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up, I can't breathe, Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil's snare, devil's snare. What did Professor Sprout say? It likes the damp and dark. So light a fire, Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood, Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione, and she whipped her wand out, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flames she had used on Snape at the plants. Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione, said Harry as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly. I would have loved. I would have loved to have had that scene in the movie. That would have been great. In the movie, the harp is playing music and Fluffy is asleep. They all go through the trapdoor as the harp has stopped playing and Fluffy wakens. They are trapped in Devil's Snare and Hermione tells them to relax. She and Harry fall through, but Ron panics. Hermione recites a piece about the plant, but that isn't in the book, and neither is the sunlight spell she uses to free Ron. It's sad that we never get to see her blue flames in the movie. In the book, they move on and hear a soft rustling and clinking from the next chamber. And this is like the movie, except there are three broomsticks and they all jump on one and fly around to find the key. In the movie, the keys attack Harry as soon as he touches the broomstick, and they don't attack in the book. In the book, the next chamber is a huge chessboard, and it's much like in the movie, except Ron gets struck across the side of his head by the White Queen. And when Harry checks the White King, he throws his crown at Harry's feet. In the movie, they are blocked by a pawn from going to the next door. In the book, Ron asks a knight if they have to play their way across. And I love the montage in the movie of Ron directing the pieces and then being attacked. And Ron says a line that has recently been picked up and is very popular online. Not me, not Hermione, you. I love it. I'm thinking about getting some merch that says, not me, not Hermione, a novel take podcast. What do you think, friends? Should I get that done? If you look carefully when Ron gets attacked and he falls to the floor, you can see a piece of debris cut him across the cheek briefly. And this is where Harry tells Hermione to take Ron and go to the owlery and send word to Dumbledore. In the book, Harry and Hermione both go through to the next chamber, which is left out of the movie. It's another troll, bigger than the one they knocked out on Halloween, but it's already been taken care of, so they move to the next chamber. It's a table with 7 bottles of various shapes in a line. As they step across the threshold, a purple fire springs up behind them and black flames come up in front of them. There's a roll of paper on the table that says, quote, Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. 1 among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers waiting hidden in line. So choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we give you these clues for. First, however slyly the poison tries to hide, you will always find some on nettle wine's left side. Second, different, are those who stand at either end, but if you would move onwards, neither is your friend. Third, as you see clearly, all are different size. Neither dwarf nor giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right are twins once you taste them, though different at first sight. I'm really proud that I got through that whole thing. I didn't make any mistakes. Pat me on the back. Yay. Clap, clap. Well done, Trace. That's never happened. Glad it happened on the last episode of Philosopher's Stone. Sorry. It takes her a minute, but Hermione figures it out. The smallest bottle will get them through the black fire towards the stone, and the round bottle at the end on the right will take them back through the purple flames. Harry tells Hermione to drink the one that will take her back towards Ron and says to, quote, "Get back and get Ron. Grab brooms from the flying key room. They'll get you out the trapdoor and past Fluffy. Go straight to the owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really." Hermione tells him what she did in the movie on the chessboard. Then she takes the potion and goes through the purple flames. Quote, Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames. "Here I come," he said, and he drained the little bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as though ice was flooding his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself, saw the black flames licking his body, but couldn't feel them. For a moment he could see nothing but dark fire. Then he was on the other side, in the last chamber. There was someone already there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. In the movie, from the chessboard chamber, Harry is walking down some steps, and this section of the movie ends at around 2 hours, 7 minutes, 17 seconds. Friends, here we are at our last chapter in Philosopher's Stone, chapter 17, The Man with Two Faces. Standing in the next chamber is Quirrell, definitely not who Harry was expecting. Harry said he thought it would be Snape, and Quirrell says, quote, "Severus. Yes, Severus does seem the type, doesn't he? So useful to have him swooping around like an overgrown bat." Keep that in mind, friends, for future books. Quirrell has conjured ropes to bind Harry, who struggles against them, and mentions that Snape seems to hate him so much. Quirrell says, quote, "Heavens, yes. He was at Hogwarts with your father, didn't you know? They loathed each other, but he never wanted you dead." Harry mentions hearing Quirrell cry a few days ago, and Quirrell says, quote, "Sometimes I find it hard to follow my master's instructions. He is a great wizard, and I am weak. He is with me wherever I go. I met him when I was traveling around the world. A foolish young man I was then, full of ridiculous ideas about good and evil. Lord Voldemort showed me how wrong I was. There is no good and evil, there is only power, and those too weak to seek it. Since then, I have served him faithfully, although I have let him down many times. He has to be very hard on me. He does not forgive mistakes easily. When I failed to steal the stone from Gringotts, he was most displeased. He punished me, decided he would have to keep a closer watch on me. Harry's mind is racing and he thinks to himself, what I want more than anything else in the world at the moment is to find the stone before Quirrell does. He tries to move in front of the mirror, but he is bound by the ropes and falls over. Quirrell ignores him and asks his master for help. Quote, "Use the boy, use the boy." Quirrell unbinds him and tells Harry to get in front of the mirror. Quote, "He closed his eyes, stepped in front of the mirror, and opened them again. A moment later, the reflection smiled at him. It put its hand into its pocket and pulled out a blood red stone. It winked and put the stone back in its pocket, and as it did so, Harry felt something heavy drop into his real pocket. Somehow, incredibly, he'd got the stone. He tells Quirrell about shaking hands with Dumbledore, like in the movie, and there's a voice that says, quote, "He lies, he lies." Quirrell unwraps his turban, quote, "Harry felt as if Devil's Snare was rooting him to the spot. He couldn't move a muscle. Petrified, he watched as Quirrell reached up and began to unwrap his turban. What was going on? The turban fell away. Quirrell's head looked strangely small without it. When he turned slowly on the spot, Harry would have screamed, but he couldn't make a sound. Where there should have been a back to Quirrell's head, there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. It was chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils like a snake. Harry Potter, it whispered. See what I have become, mere shadow and vapor. I have form only when I can share another's body, but there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me this past weeks. You saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me in the forest, and once I have the elixir of life, I'll be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket? Harry stumbles backwards and the face says, quote, don't be a fool. Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging for mercy. Liar, Harry shouted suddenly. How touching. I always value bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight. But your mother needn't have died. She was trying to protect you. Now give me the stone unless you want her to have died in vain. In the movie, this is mostly the same, except they don't talk about Snape or Harry's father. When Harry goes to run away with a stone, Quirrell conjures a fire across the staircase exit. In the book, Voldemort screams to Quirrell to seize Harry. Quirrell grips Harry's wrist and pain sears across Harry's scar, like his head is going to split in two. He struggles and Quirrell lets him go, and Harry notices Quirrell's fingers blistering. Quirrell cannot hold him, and even with Voldemort telling him to kill Harry, when Quirrell raises an arm to cast a spell, Harry grabs Quirrell by the arm and hangs on tight. They struggle, Quirrell is screaming in pain, and eventually Harry blacks out. In the movie, when Harry touches Quirrell's face, Quirrell disintegrates, similar to Voldemort in Deathly Hallows. In the book, when he wakes, something gold is glittering just above him, and he thinks it's the snitch, but it's Dumbledore's glasses. Dumbledore calms him and says Quirrell doesn't have the stone, and that, quote, what happened down in the dungeons between you and Professor Quirrell is a complete secret. So, naturally, the whole school knows. Fred and George tried to send him a lavatory seat, which is something, if we cast our minds way back to episode 1, is what they promised to send to Ginny. Harry asks Dumbledore about the stone, and Dumbledore tells him the stone has been destroyed, but that Nicholas Flamel and his wife have enough to set their affairs in order. He says Harry was almost killed and that he got to Harry just in time. He does sound delighted, though, and says, quote, you did the thing properly, didn't you? Harry asks Dumbledore about you-know-who, and Dumbledore tells him to call him Voldemort. Quote, always use the proper name for things. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. It's said by Dumbledore and not Hermione. Dumbledore says Voldemort is still out there somewhere. Then Harry has some other questions. Harry, Voldemort said that he only killed my mother because she tried to stop him killing me. But why would he want to kill me in the first place? Dumbledore, the first thing you ask me, I cannot tell you. Not today. Not now. You will know one day. Put it from your mind for now, Harry. When you are older, I know you hate to hear this. When you are ready, you will know. Harry, why couldn't Quirrell touch me? Dumbledore, your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He doesn't realize that love, as powerful as your mother's for you, leaves its own mark. Not a scar, no visible sign. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. It is in your very skin. Quirrell, full of hatred, greed, and ambition, sharing his soul with Voldemort, could not touch you for this reason. It was agony to touch a person marked by something so good. Harry, and the invisibility cloak, do you know who sent that to me? Dumbledore, your father happened to leave it in my possession, and I thought you might like it. Useful things. Your father used it mainly for sneaking off to the kitchens to steal food when he was here. Harry, Quirrell said Snape hates me because he hated my father. Is that true? Dumbledore. Well, they did rather detest each other, not unlike yourself and Mr. Malfoy. And then your father did something Snape could never forgive. He saved his life. Funny the way people's minds work, isn't it? Professor Snape couldn't bear being in your father's debt. I do believe he'd worked so hard to protect you this year because he felt that would make him and your father quits. Then he could go back to hating your father's memory in peace. Harry is trying to understand and asks one more question. How did I get the stone out of the mirror? Dumbledore. It was one of my more brilliant ideas. You see, only one who wanted to find the stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. Otherwise, they would just see themselves making gold or drinking elixir of life. In the movie, Harry doesn't ask all the questions to Dumbledore. He doesn't ask why Quirrell couldn't touch him. Dumbledore actually volunteers that information. Harry also doesn't ask why Voldemort tried to kill him, and he doesn't ask who gave him the invisibility cloak. In the book, Dumbledore leaves, and Madame Pomfrey objects to Ron and Hermione visiting, but then gives them 5 minutes together. Ron says the whole school's talking about it and asks what happened, and Harry tells them everything. Harry then asks what happened to them, and Hermione says, quote, I got back all right. I brought Ron around, and we were dashing up to the owlery to contact Dumbledore when we met him in the entrance hall. He already knew. He just said, quote, Harry's gone after him, hasn't he? And hurtled off to the third floor. Ron asks if Harry thinks Dumbledore meant for him to do it, and Harry says, quote, I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he knows more or less everything that goes on here. I reckon he had a pretty good idea we were going to try, and instead of stopping us, he taught us enough to help. I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had a right to face Voldemort if I could. The next day, Harry is almost back to normal and he's begging to go to the feast, but Madame Pomfrey is reluctant, but Dumbledore says he is allowed. She then says that Harry has another visitor, and it's Hagrid, who is incredibly upset and sobbing that it's all his fault. But Harry says it's not and gives him a chocolate frog. Then Hagrid has a present for Harry, and quote, it seemed to be a handsome, leather covered book. Harry opened it curiously. It was full of wizard photographs. Smiling and waving at him from every page were his mother and father. Sent owls off to all your parents' old school friends asking for photos. Knew you didn't have any. Harry couldn't speak, but Hagrid understood. Harry heads to the feast, and the Great Hall is covered in Slytherin's colours of green and silver to celebrate the winning of the House Cup for the 7th year in a row. There's a large banner with a Slytherin snake covering the wall behind the high table. When Harry walks in, there's a hush, and then everyone starts talking loudly. He sits between Ron and Hermione and ignores everyone looking at him. Dumbledore arrives and says, quote, another year gone, and I must trouble you with an old man's wheezing waffle before we sink our teeth into our delicious feast. What a year it has been. Hopefully your heads are all a little fuller than they were. You have the whole summer ahead to get them nice and empty before next year starts. Now, as I understand, the house cup here needs awarding, and the house points stand thus. In fourth place, Gryffindor with 312 points. In third, Hufflepuff with 352, Ravenclaw 426, and Slytherin 472. There's cheering from the Slytherin table, and Dumbledore says, quote, yes, yes, well done, Slytherin. However, recent events must be taken into account. I have a few last-minute points to dish out. Let me see. Yes, first, to Mr. Ronald Weasley, for the best played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Second, to Miss Hermione Granger, for the use of cool logic in the face of fire, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Third, to Mr. Harry Potter, for pure nerve and outstanding courage, I award Gryffindor House 60 points. In the movie, Dumbledore awards Hermione points first, not Ron. In the book, the noise is deafening. Gryffindor has the same amount of points as Slytherin. They're tied for the House Cup. Dumbledore raises his hand and the room falls silent again. Quote, "There are all types of courage. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. I therefore award 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom." It sounds like an explosion has gone off with the Gryffindors cheering. Harry, Ron, and Hermione congratulate Neville, who had never won a point before. Dumbledore changes the green hangings to scarlet and the silver to gold, and the Slytherin snake is replaced with the Gryffindor lion, and it's the best evening of Harry's life. He almost forgot about exam results, but he and Ron pass with good marks, and Hermione is, of course, top of the year. Neville gets through as well, his herbology mark making up for his potions one. Then they are all packed and ready to go. Hagrid takes them to the boats to sail back across the lake, and they take the Hogwarts Express to King's Cross Station and platform 9 3/4. A wizard guard lets them through the barrier in twos and threes so they don't attract too much attention, and Ron invites them to come and stay over the summer. Harry meets Mrs. Weasley and thanks her for the fudge and the jumper. Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and Dudley are there, terrified of Harry, and he tells Ron and Hermione he'll have fun with Dudley over the summer. The Dursleys don't know he isn't allowed to use magic at home. In the movie, Hagrid gives Harry the photo album at Hogsmeade Station before he gets on the train, and he also tells him that the Dursleys don't know Harry can't do magic outside of school. Harry's not going home. Not really. So ends the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone movie, directed by Chris Columbus. Wow. In the movie, what is shown is not a dragon, it's a wyvern. Dragons have 4 legs and wings, and a wyvern has 2 legs with claws at either the pointy joint of their wings or the end of their wings. And the same goes for the dragons in Game of Thrones. Those are actually wyverns. Now, in some places in Europe, wyverns are also called dragons, but I think it's important to make that distinction. When you're writing a fantasy novel and then having it made into a film or TV show, there is a difference between the two creatures. A great example of an actual dragon in a book turned film is Saphira from the Aragon movie because she has 4 legs. And I hope if Fourth Wing is turned into a TV show or movie that they get it right, especially considering there are both dragons and wyverns in the series. But that's a conversation for a whole nother episode. It's Pixie's Pinion time, and this week I want to talk about the information dump Harry gets from Quirrell and Dumbledore in the book, but it's left out of the movie. How do we feel about this, friends? This is a massive plot point that separates the book from the movie. I think the book gives us all these background details, the ins and outs of relationships, situations, etc. And the movie just skims over it all or just doesn't include it like it's not important. Do you think they knew how important all this info would be in the upcoming movies? If She Who Must Not Be Named gave Alan Rickman critical plot or character information from the start, surely she could have done the same for the movies. Or do you think this is just a consequence of not having the book series completed before starting the movies? Let me know your thoughts. This week, Arya asks, have you ever succeeded in a task that seemed monumental, like your friends were right there beside you and you came out on top? Also, did Dumbledore or Snape know that Voldemort was with Quirrell? Is Quirrell a good Occlumens? What do you think? And friends, we have Quote Watch. I forgot to include this last week, but this is where we're at. You look like your father / you have your mother's eyes. Watch is 3. Brandy Watch is now 3. I told you it was coming. Woohoo! Dumbledore's the only one Voldemort was afraid of. Watch is now at 3. Seamus Finnegan blowing things up is still at 2. And Movie Harry saying, I don't know, is at 3. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this week's episode and for listening along for the last month. I had an idea to start a podcast months ago, but was still working full time and I didn't really know what I wanted it to be. And it was only after my work contract ended and I'd been out of work for a couple of months that I needed to keep my mind active and decided to really give this a go. And I'm so glad that I did. I've had so much fun rereading Philosopher's Stone and rewatching the movie. I'd just truly forgotten how much had been left out and just how much I love the books and the depth of the story and the characters. Breaking down and comparing the two mediums is such an ambitious endeavor, but I've always championed reading the books before watching a film or TV series, and I will continue to do so. I've mentioned on previous episodes that I'm still learning all this podcasting stuff, and I know what a Novel Take podcast will look like at the end of Deathly Hallows is just going to be so different to what it looks and sounds like now. But that's the joy in growing and learning. You get to change and find yourself. And I'm slowly finding the type of podcast host that I want to be. I'm going to take a break between books next week, and we'll be back Friday, November 15th with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, chapters 1 to 3, The Worst Birthday, Dobby's Warning, and The Burrow. Before I go, please, please, please remember to support the podcast any way you can. Rate and review wherever you're listening. This is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and Amazon Music now as well. And don't forget to please subscribe so that you get the new episodes as soon as they're released. And you can follow along on Instagram and Threads at A Novel Take Podcast, where I'm still figuring out how to do all the social media stuff. So please bear with me, it will get better. I'll put all the links in the show notes to all the things. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening along to me ranting and talking and theorizing and uh, asking questions and weird stuff about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I have really, really enjoyed this last month in making this podcast, and I look forward to Chamber of Secrets. So please take care, everyone. And until next time, I'm Tracey, and may your favorite part of a book always make it into the adaptation. And Ron says there's the common Welsh green, the hub. Fuck, I'm gonna fuck this word up so much. Hebridean. And Ron says there's the common Welsh and the Hebridean. And Ron says there's the common Welsh green and the Hebridean. Fuck this. Fuck. And Ron says there's the common Welsh green and the Hebridean. That's not how you say it. Harry asks if it could be a werewolf, but Hagrid says they aren't fast enough to catch a uniform. Yeah, let's catch a uniform. Sweet. Harry mentions hearing Quirrell cry. Blah, blah. I'm still awake. It's my favorite from the Bolt track.